I think I didn't do anything wrong, just wanted some space after a silly fight. So when my husband handed me that thick envelope from a lawyer, I honestly felt shocked. How could he do this to me, after everything I've done for our family? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The dinner table felt like a battlefield that Thursday evening. Jonas sat across from me, methodically cutting his chicken, while our 8-year-old daughter Ella pushed peas around her plate. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, thick with unspoken accusations and hurt feelings. "So you're just not going to talk to me?" I finally said, setting down my fork with more force than necessary. The clink against the ceramic plate seemed to echo in our suburban duplex's small dining room. Jonas looked up, his brown eyes tired behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "What would you like me to say, Ligeia?" "Maybe start with an apology for embarrassing me at Tom's birthday party last weekend." I crossed my arms, feeling the familiar surge of righteousness that always came when I knew I was in the right. "You completely ignored me all night, then acted like I was some kind of stranger when people asked about us." "I ignored you?" Jonas's voice remained calm, that infuriating, steady tone he always used when he thought he was being reasonable. "You spent the entire evening talking to Eric Vasquez in the corner. When I tried to join the conversation, you both went quiet." "He's my coworker, Jonas. We were discussing work stuff. You wouldn't understand anyway. It's HR business." I glanced at Ella, who had gone completely still, her dark eyes darting between us. "Can we not do this in front of our daughter?" "You're right." Jonas stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Ella, why don't you go watch TV in the living room while Mum and I clean up?" Ella nodded quickly, clearly relieved to escape the tension. As soon as she was out of earshot, Jonas turned back to me, his expression harder than before. "Ligeia, people are talking. Tom asked me point blank if everything was okay between us. Martha called me yesterday asking why you and Eric seemed so close." I felt my cheeks flush with anger. "Your mother needs to mind her own business, and so do you for that matter. Eric is going through a difficult divorce and I'm being supportive. That's what decent people do." "Supportive?" Jonas repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Is that what you call the 2-hour lunch breaks, the late-night texts, the way you light up every time his name comes up?" My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. "You're being paranoid, Jonas. Just because you don't have any friends at work doesn't mean I can't have normal professional relationships." "Normal?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "When was the last time you stayed late to help any other coworker? When was the last time you talked about anyone else the way you talk about Eric?" I stood up abruptly, my chair nearly tipping backward. "I can't believe you're doing this. After 6 years of marriage, you don't trust me enough to have a friendship with a colleague." "A friendship?" Jonas shook his head, starting to gather the dishes. "Right." The dismissive way he said it made something snap inside me. "You know what? If you're so unhappy with me, if you can't stand the thought of me having friends or a life outside this house, maybe I should just stay at Clara's place for a few nights. Give you some time to think about whether you want to be married to someone you clearly don't trust." Jonas froze, a plate halfway to the sink. "Is that what you want?" "I want my husband to stop acting like a jealous teenager and start treating me with some respect." I grabbed my purse from the counter. "But since that seems impossible, yeah, maybe some space would be good for both of us." I expected him to stop me, to apologize, to beg me to stay. That's how these fights usually went. I'd threaten to leave, he'd realize he was being unreasonable, and we'd make up. Instead, Jonas just nodded slowly. "Okay," he said quietly. "If that's what you think is best." The word hit me like a slap. "Okay? That's it?" "What do you want me to say, Ligeia? You've made your decision." I stared at him, waiting for the crack in his composure, the moment when he'd cave and ask me to stay. But Jonas just continued loading the dishwasher, his movements deliberate and calm. "Fine," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I'll pack a bag." 20 minutes later, I stood in our bedroom, throwing clothes into my overnight bag, while Jonas sat on the edge of the bed, watching silently. Every few seconds, I'd glance at him, sure he was about to speak up, to tell me this was ridiculous and we should work it out. "Mummy?" Ella's small voice came from the doorway. "Are you going somewhere?" My throat tightened. "Just for a couple days, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy need a little break to think about some grown-up stuff." Ella's face crumpled. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby, of course not." I knelt down and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "This has nothing to do with you. Sometimes adults just need space to figure things out." Over Ella's shoulder, I saw Jonas's jaw tighten. When I stood up, he was looking at me with something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but a kind of cold assessment that made my skin crawl. "I'll call you tomorrow," I told him, zipping up my bag. "Sure," he said. I waited for more, for him to ask when I'd be back, to say he'd miss me, to show some emotion beyond that terrible calm. When he didn't, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. As I loaded my bag into my Honda Civic, I could see Ella's face pressed against her bedroom window. I waved, trying to look cheerful and confident, but inside, I felt shaken. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, engine running, waiting for Jonas to come outside. When the front door remained firmly closed, I finally backed out of the driveway. At the first red light, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Eric's number. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed, "Having a rough night. Sometimes I wonder if I'm in the wrong marriage." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then immediately felt a stab of guilt. But it wasn't like I was doing anything wrong, I told myself. I was just reaching out to a friend who understood what it was like to have relationship problems. My phone buzzed with a response faster than I'd expected. "Sorry to hear that. Hope things get better." Short, polite, nothing inappropriate. See, I was being completely reasonable. Jonas was the one with the problem, not me. Clara's apartment smelled like vanilla candles and fresh laundry when she opened the door at 9:30 that night. My best friend since college took one look at my overnight bag and tired expression and immediately ushered me inside. "Honey, what happened?" She guided me to her overstuffed couch and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 glasses of wine. "You sounded upset on the phone, but I didn't realize it was this bad." I accepted the wine gratefully and sank into the familiar comfort of Clara's living room. We'd been through so much together over the years. Bad breakups, job losses, family drama. She'd always been my safe harbor when life got complicated. "Jonas is being impossible," I said, taking a long sip of the wine. "He's gotten it into his head that I'm having some kind of inappropriate relationship with Eric from work and he won't listen to reason." Clara tucked her legs under herself and settled into the opposite corner of the couch. "Eric Vasquez? The guy who's going through the divorce?" "That's the one. He's been having a really hard time and I've just been trying to be supportive. You know, listening when he needs to talk, grabbing lunch together sometimes. Basic human decency." "And Jonas has a problem with that?" I nodded, feeling the familiar surge of indignation. "He's acting like I'm having an affair or something. It's completely ridiculous. Eric and I are friends, period. But Jonas has gotten so paranoid and controlling that he can't handle me having any male friends at all." Clara frowned, swirling her wine thoughtfully. "That does seem extreme. I mean, you work in HR. You have to interact with men all the time." "Exactly. But apparently, Jonas thinks I should only have superficial professional relationships. God forbid I actually care about a colleague who's going through a rough patch." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "Clara, he didn't even try to stop me from leaving tonight. When I said I was coming here, he just said okay, like he couldn't wait to get rid of me." "Oh, honey." Clara reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm sure he didn't mean it that way. He's probably just hurt and confused. Men don't always handle emotional situations well. That's what I keep telling myself, but I trailed off, remembering the cold look in Jonas's eyes. He's never been like this before. Even when we fight, he usually tries to work things out. Tonight, it was like he'd already made up his mind about something. My phone buzzed with a text from my mum. "Heard from Jonas that you're staying at Clara's. Call me tomorrow, we need to talk." I showed Clara the message and she raised an eyebrow. "Jonas called your parents." "Apparently." I felt a flash of anger, probably trying to get them on his side before I can explain what really happened. "Or maybe he's just worried about you and wanted to make sure someone knew where you were," Clara suggested gently. I wanted to believe that, but the timing felt too calculated. Jonas was a software engineer. He thought about everything in terms of systems and processes. If he was already reaching out to my family, it meant he was planning something. We talked for another hour, with Clara offering the kind of unconditional support I'd always counted on. She made up the guest bed with fresh sheets and lent me a pair of pajamas, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe again. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay in Clara's spare room, staring at the ceiling and replaying the evening's events. Had I overreacted? Was Jonas right to be concerned about my friendship with Eric? No, I told myself firmly. I was being a good friend to someone who needed support. If Jonas couldn't handle that, it said more about his insecurities than about my behavior. My phone lit up with another text, and my heart jumped, thinking it might be Jonas. Instead, it was from Tom, Jonas's younger brother. "Hey Ligeia, heard you and Jonas are having some problems. Is it true what people are saying about you and that guy from your work?" I stared at the message, my stomach dropping. What people? What were they saying? I typed back, "I don't know what you've heard, but Jonas is blowing a simple friendship way out of proportion. There's nothing inappropriate going on." Tom's response came quickly. "Look, I'm not trying to get in the middle of this, but Jonas is really hurt. Maybe you should think about how this looks from the outside." How this looks from the outside. The phrase stuck in my mind like a splinter. Why was everyone so concerned about appearances instead of the truth? I was helping a friend through a difficult time. Since when was compassion something to be ashamed of? I turned my phone face down and tried to push the doubts away. Tomorrow, I'd call Jonas and we'd have a rational conversation about this whole misunderstanding. Once he calmed down and stopped listening to his mother's paranoid theories, we'd work things out. We always did. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the memory of Jonas's face when I'd packed my bag. Not angry or hurt, but resigned, like he'd been expecting this moment for a long time. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. My heart hammered as I scrolled through them, expecting to see Jonas's name, but most were from coworkers and a few mutual friends. The first message, from my HR assistant Katie, made my blood run cold. "Ligeia, people are talking about you and Eric. Thought you should know before you come in today." I sat up in bed, fully awake now, and read through the rest of the messages. The picture they painted was devastating. Apparently, someone had seen Eric and me at lunch yesterday and posted about it on social media. The story had grown in the telling. We were all over each other, according to one account, acting like teenagers, according to another. My hands shook as I called Katie back. "Oh, thank God," she said when she picked up. "Ligeia, it's bad, really bad. Someone took a picture of you and Eric at that cafe on 5th Street, and it's been shared in like 3 different group chats. People are saying you're having an affair." "That's ridiculous," I said, but my voice came out weaker than I'd intended. "We were just having lunch. We're friends." "I know, but the picture—" Katie hesitated. "You guys were sitting really close, and he had his hand on your arm. It looks intimate." I closed my eyes, trying to remember the lunch she was talking about. Eric had been upset about his custody hearing, and I'd been comforting him. Yes, we'd sat close together, and yes, he'd touched my arm when he was thanking me for listening. but it was completely innocent. Katie, you know me. You know I would never. I believe you, she said quickly. But you know how people are. And Ligeia, Eric's ex-wife Carmen heard about it. She's furious. She's been calling around, trying to get more information about you two. My stomach dropped. Carmen Vasquez was known for her temper and her tendency to hold grudges. If she thought I was somehow involved in her divorce. This is insane, I muttered. People need to mind their own business. Maybe you should talk to Eric, Katie suggested. See if you two can get ahead of this somehow. I hung up and immediately tried calling Eric, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent him a text. We need to talk. People are spreading rumors about us. His response came an hour later. I know. We should probably keep our distance for a while until this blows over. Keep our distance? I stared at the message, feeling betrayed. Here I was, dealing with the fallout from our friendship, and he was abandoning me to handle it alone. I typed back, so you're just going to let people think the worst of me? Ligeia, I can't afford any more drama right now. My custody case is still pending, and Carmen is already trying to use this against me. I'm sorry, but we need to cool it. Cool it. Like we were actually having an affair, instead of just being friends. Clara knocked on the guest room door and peeked in. Everything okay? You look upset. I filled her in on the situation, watching her expression grow more concerned with each detail. Okay, she said when I finished. This is manageable. You just need to be smart about how you handle it. Maybe take a sick day today. Let things calm down over the weekend. I can't hide, I said. That'll just make me look guilty. But even as I said it, I knew I couldn't face the office today. The thought of walking into that building, feeling everyone's eyes on me, hearing the whispers that would stop when I entered a room, it was too much. I called in sick and spent the day at Clara's apartment, alternating between righteous anger and creeping anxiety. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, expecting another message about the rumors, or, hopefully, a call from Jonas. But Jonas remained silent. By evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove back to the house, determined to have a rational conversation with my husband. We were both adults. Surely we could work through this misunderstanding. The house was dark, except for Jonas's home office, where I could see the blue glow of his computer screen through the window. I used my key to let myself in, calling out as I entered. Jonas, it's me. We need to talk. He appeared in the hallway, looking tired but unsurprised to see me. How was your day at Clara's? It was fine, I said, though we both knew that was a lie. Jonas, there are rumors going around about Eric and me. Completely false rumors, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. I already heard, he said quietly. Martha called me this morning. Apparently, someone forwarded her the picture. My cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. It's not what it looks like. Eric was upset about his custody case, and I was comforting him. That's what friends do. Jonas studied my face for a long moment. Ligeia, can you honestly tell me that you don't have feelings for Eric? The question caught me off guard. Of course I don't have feelings for him. He's my friend. That's not what I asked. Jonas's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it. I asked if you have feelings for him, romantic feelings. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. Did I have feelings for Eric? I cared about him, obviously. I looked forward to our conversations, our lunches together. When he smiled at me, I felt appreciated, valued, like I was interesting and worth listening to. But that wasn't romantic. That was just friendship. I care about him as a friend, I said finally. If that's what you mean by feelings, then yes, I have feelings for him. The same way I have feelings for Clara, or any of my other friends. Jonas nodded slowly, but I could see he didn't believe me. Okay, and the late nights at work, the long lunches, the constant texting. He's going through a divorce, Jonas. He needs support. From you specifically? From his friends, yes. And you don't see how that might be inappropriate, how it might look to other people, how it might affect our marriage. I felt my temper flare. So now I'm supposed to base my friendships on how they look to other people. I'm supposed to abandon someone who needs help because a bunch of gossips have dirty minds. You're supposed to consider your family first, Jonas said, and for the first time, his calm facade cracked slightly. You're supposed to care about how your actions affect your husband and daughter. I do care about my family, but I also care about doing the right thing, about being a good person. And I'm not a good person for wanting my wife to prioritize our marriage. The question hung between us like a challenge. I could see the hurt in Jonas's eyes, the way his shoulders had tensed, and part of me wanted to reach out to him, to apologize and promise to do better. But a larger part of me felt angry and misunderstood. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was being compassionate and supportive to someone who needed help. If Jonas couldn't see that, if he was going to side with the gossips and rumor-mongers, then maybe the problem wasn't with my behavior. I think I should go back to Clara's, I said quietly. At least until you can think about this rationally. Jonas's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. If that's what you want. It's not what I want, Jonas. It's what seems necessary right now. He nodded once, then turned and walked back toward his office. I'll tell Ella you stopped by. I stood in the hallway for another minute, waiting for him to come back, to fight for our marriage, to show some emotion beyond that infuriating calm. When he didn't, I let myself out and drove back to Clara's, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. This wasn't how marriages were supposed to work. When couples hit rough patches, they were supposed to fight for each other, not give up at the first sign of trouble. But as I pulled into Clara's parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jonas wasn't giving up on our marriage. He was protecting himself from it. By Monday morning, I knew I couldn't avoid work any longer. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit and drove to the office early, hoping to avoid the worst of the gossip mill. That plan lasted exactly 15 minutes. I was in the break room, trying to act normal while making coffee, when Carmen Vasquez walked in. Eric's ex-wife was a small woman, but she carried herself with the kind of fierce energy that made her seem much larger. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her brown eyes were blazing with fury. Well, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. If it isn't the homewrecker herself. Carmen, I don't know what you think you know, but I know exactly what I know, she interrupted, stepping closer. I know you've been sniffing around my ex-husband like a dog in heat. I know you've been filling his head with sob stories about your terrible marriage while he's going through our divorce. That's not... I know, Carmen continued, her voice rising, that you've been manipulating him, using his vulnerability to get your claws into him while you're still married to your own husband. The break room had gone completely silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, could practically hear them memorizing every word to share later. Carmen, you're upset, and I understand that, but you're completely wrong about this situation. I tried to keep my voice calm and professional. Eric and I are friends, that's all. Friends? Carmen laughed, but it was an ugly sound. Is that what you call it when you're texting him at all hours? When you're having intimate lunches and playing therapist to a married man going through a divorce? I was trying to be supportive. You were trying to be his next wife. Carmen's voice echoed off the break room walls. You think I don't know how this works? You think I haven't seen women like you before? You find a man when he's vulnerable, when his life is falling apart, and you swoop in playing the understanding friend. The one who really gets him, unlike his crazy ex-wife. Heat flooded my cheeks. You don't know anything about me or my motivations. I know you're a predator, Carmen said flatly. I know you're the kind of woman who destroys families for sport, and I know that if you don't stay away from Eric, I'm going to make your life very, very difficult. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. Carmen stepped even closer, lowering her voice to a whisper that somehow felt more menacing than her shouting. I will call your boss. I will call your husband. I will call everyone in this pathetic little office and tell them exactly what kind of person you are. I will make sure everyone knows that Ligeia Brandt is a marriage-wrecking, manipulative... That's enough. Eric's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He stood in the doorway, his face pale but determined. Carmen, you need to leave, now. Carmen whirled around to face him. Oh, look who finally shows up to defend his little girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend, and you know it. Eric stepped into the room, and I noticed how he positioned himself between Carmen and me. You're making a scene, and you're going to get security called if you don't calm down. I'm making a scene? Carmen's voice climbed another octave. Your friend here has been chasing after you for months, and I'm the one making a scene. Carmen. No, Eric, I'm done pretending this is innocent. I'm done letting her play victim while she destroys everything she touches. Carmen turned back to me, her eyes blazing. You want to know what I think? I think your husband finally figured out what you are. I think he finally saw through your act, and that's why you're sleeping on your friend's couch instead of in your own bed. The words hit me like a physical blow. How did she know I was staying at Clara's? That's right, Carmen said, seeing my expression. Word gets around. Your own husband doesn't want you anymore, so now you're trying to steal mine. He's not your husband anymore, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Carmen's face went white with rage. You little... Okay, that's it. Eric grabbed Carmen's arm, not roughly but firmly. You're leaving, now. Don't you dare touch me, Carmen hissed, but she allowed him to guide her toward the door. This isn't over, she called back to me. Not even close. The break room remained silent for a full minute after she left. Then, slowly, people began to murmur and drift away, casting glances back at me that ranged from sympathetic to speculative to openly judgmental. Eric returned a few minutes later, looking exhausted. Ligeia, I'm sorry about that. Carmen's been difficult since the divorce papers were filed. It's not your fault, I said, though my hands were still shaking. But Eric, we need to talk. This situation is getting out of control. I know. He glanced around the break room, which was still occupied by a few lingering co-workers. But not here, and honestly, maybe Carmen's right about one thing. Maybe we should keep our distance for a while. So you're abandoning me too? The words came out more bitter than I'd intended, and Eric flinched. I'm not abandoning you. I'm trying to protect both of us. My lawyer says that if Carmen can prove I was having an inappropriate relationship during our separation, it could affect my custody arrangement. But we're not having an inappropriate relationship. I know that, and you know that. But perception matters. And right now, the perception is... He trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. The perception was that I was a home wrecker, a marriage destroyer, a woman who couldn't be trusted around other people's husbands. I spent the rest of the day trying to work normally, but I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, could hear the whispers that stopped when I walked by. By lunchtime, I was ready to scream. That's when my phone rang with a call from Jonas. We need to meet, he said without preamble. Can you be at the cafe on Maple Street in an hour? Jonas, I'm at work. This can't wait, Ligeia. 1 hour. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone with a mixture of hope and dread. Maybe he was ready to talk, to work things out like rational adults. Or maybe Carmen had made good on her threat to call him. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, praying that whatever Jonas wanted to discuss, we could handle it together. The cafe on Maple Street was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few college students with laptops and an elderly man reading a newspaper. Jonas sat at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee already waiting. He looked up when I entered, and I was struck by how different he seemed, older somehow, and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down across from him. Of course. I reached for his hand, but he pulled back slightly, and my heart sank. Jonas, I know things have been difficult lately, but we can work through this. We always do. Do we? He studied my face with that same cold assessment I'd seen the night I left. Ligeia, I need you to answer some questions for me. Honestly. Okay. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup, grateful for the warmth. How long have you been having an affair with Eric Vasquez? The question hit me like a slap. I'm not having an affair with Eric. We're friends. Friends who text each other at midnight. Friends who have 2-hour lunches 3 times a week. Friends who lie to their spouses about working late. I never lied about working late. Jonas pulled out his phone and scrolled through something before turning the screen toward me. It was a screenshot of my work schedule, showing that I'd clocked out at 5:30 on several days when I'd told him I was working until 7. Where did you get that? I whispered. Does it matter? The point is, you lied, repeatedly. Jonas put his phone away. So I'll ask again. How long have you been having an affair? I'm not having an affair. The words came out louder than I'd intended, and the college students looked over curiously. I lowered my voice. Jonas, I swear to you, I have never cheated on you. Eric and I are friends. Yes, we spend time together, but it's completely innocent. Innocent? Jonas nodded slowly. Then you won't mind if I call Eric right now and ask him to join us? If you're just friends, he shouldn't have any problem discussing your relationship in front of your husband. My stomach dropped. That's not... Jonas, he's dealing with a lot right now. His ex-wife is already causing problems about our friendship. Involving him in our marital issues isn't fair. Our marital issues? Jonas's voice was dangerously quiet. Ligeia, Eric is our marital issue. Your relationship with him is the entire problem. No, the problem is that you don't trust me. The problem is that you're listening to gossips and troublemakers instead of believing your own wife. The problem, Jonas said, reaching into his jacket pocket, is this. He slid a manila folder across the table. With trembling hands, I opened it to find printed copies of text messages. My text messages with Eric. Dozens of them, going back months. Where did you get these? I whispered, scanning the pages. They were taken out of context, but I could see how they might look suspicious to someone who didn't understand the situation. Your phone syncs to our shared iCloud account, Jonas said calmly. I've been watching this develop for weeks, hoping I was wrong, hoping you'd come to your senses. I flipped through the pages, seeing conversations I'd forgotten about, messages that seemed innocent when I'd sent them, but looked damning on paper. Jonas, these aren't what they look like. I wish I could be with someone who really understands me, he read from one of the printouts. Jonas doesn't appreciate what he has. Sometimes I think I married the wrong person. Should I go on? I was venting. Eric was going through his divorce, and we were both frustrated with our situations. It's not like I was planning to leave you for him. Weren't you? Jonas pulled out another sheet of paper. This is from last week. Maybe we should both just start over with people who actually care about us. I stared at the message, remembering the context. Eric had been upset about a custody hearing, and I'd been trying to make him feel better. But seeing it printed out like this, removed from the conversation around it, I could understand how it looked. Jonas, you're taking these completely out of context. Yes, I was frustrated with our marriage. Yes, I was talking to Eric about it, but that doesn't mean I was having an affair. An emotional affair, then. The phrase hung between us like an accusation. That's not... I was just being a friend. To him, what about being a wife to me? The question was quiet, but it cut deeper than any shouting could have. I looked up from the papers to find Jonas watching me, with something that looked almost like pity. I am your wife. I love you, Jonas. I love our family. Do you? He leaned back in his chair. Because for the past 6 months, you've been more invested in Eric's problems than in our marriage. You've been more excited to see him than to come home to me and Ella. You've been sharing our private business with him while shutting me out. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my day? When was the last time you seemed genuinely happy to see me? When was the last time you talked to me the way you talked to Eric in these messages? I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came. When was the last time I'd been excited to see Jonas? When was the last time I'd looked forward to our conversations, the way I looked forward to my lunches with Eric? I can see you thinking about it, Jonas said softly, and that tells me everything I need to know. Jonas, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. I'll stop talking to Eric if that's what you want. I'll do whatever it takes. It's too late for that, Ligeia. The words were spoken so quietly I almost didn't hear them. What do you mean? Jonas reached into his other pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. I mean, I've already filed for separation. These are the papers. The cafe seemed to spin around me. You what? I filed this morning. You'll need to find a lawyer. Jonas, you can't be serious. Over some text messages, over a friendship, over a pattern of deception and emotional infidelity that's been going on for months. His voice remained calm, professional, like he was discussing a work project. Over the fact that you moved out of our house to avoid dealing with the consequences of your actions. Over the fact that even now, sitting here with the evidence in front of you, you're still trying to minimize what you've done. I'm not minimizing anything. I'm trying to save our marriage. No, you're trying to avoid accountability. There's a difference. I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for 6 years, and felt like I was looking at a stranger. Jonas, please. Think about Ella. Think about our family. I'm thinking about Ella. I'm thinking about what it's doing to her to watch her mother sneak around and lie. I'm thinking about what kind of example we're setting for her about marriage and commitment. So you're just going to throw away 6 years of marriage? Just like that? I'm not throwing anything away, Ligeia. You already did that. The envelope sat on the table between us like a bomb. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, as if ignoring it might make it disappear. This is insane, I whispered. People work through these things. Couples go to counseling. They don't just give up. You're right, Jonas said, but that requires both people to acknowledge there's a problem and commit to fixing it. You can't even admit that what you've been doing is wrong. Because it's not wrong. Having a friend isn't wrong. Jonas stood up, leaving money on the table for the coffee. When you're ready to be honest with yourself about what this really was, you can call my lawyer. His information is in the envelope. Jonas, wait. But he was already walking away, leaving me alone with the papers and the wreckage of my marriage. I sat there for a long time, staring at the envelope, willing this to be some kind of nightmare I could wake up from. This couldn't be happening. People didn't end marriages over friendships. They didn't file separation papers over text messages taken out of context. Finally, I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The legal language was dense and formal, but the meaning was clear. Jonas wanted a legal separation with the intent to file for divorce. He was asking for primary custody of Ella, citing my emotional instability and inappropriate relationship with a coworker. My hands shook as I read through the documents. At the bottom was a business card for an attorney named Michael Chen, with a note in Jonas's handwriting. All communication should go through my lawyer from now on. I drove back to Clara's apartment in a daze, the papers sitting on the passenger seat like an accusation. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw a familiar car waiting for me. Carmen Vasquez stepped out as I parked, her expression triumphant. Heard you had an interesting lunch, she called out. Funny how quickly karma comes around, isn't it? I ignored her and hurried toward Clara's building, but Carmen followed. You know what the best part is? She continued. Eric doesn't want anything to do with you now. He's too worried about his custody case to risk being associated with a homewrecker. I spun around to face her. Leave me alone, Carmen. Oh, I will. Now that your husband's finally seen what you really are, my work here is done. She smiled, and it was one of the cruelest expressions I'd ever seen. Enjoy explaining to your daughter why Mommy destroyed her family for a man who doesn't even want her. She got back in her car and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with tears streaming down my face and divorce papers clutched in my hands. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, legal consultations, and desperate attempts to salvage what was left of my life. I hired a lawyer, not as good as Jonas's, but the best I could afford, and tried to build a case for why I deserved joint custody and half of our assets. Clara had been supportive at first, but I could see her growing distant as the full scope of the situation became clear. She'd read the text messages Jonas had printed out, and while she didn't say anything directly, I could see the judgment in her eyes. "Maybe you should consider counseling," she suggested over coffee Thursday morning. "Individual counseling, I mean, to help you process all this." "I don't need counseling," I said. "I need people to understand that I didn't do anything wrong." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "Ligeia, honey, I love you, but some of those messages were pretty intimate. If I were Jonas, I'd be hurt too." "You're taking his side?" "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just saying that maybe there's some truth to what he's feeling." I stared at my best friend, feeling the last of my support system crumble. "I can't believe this. Even you think I'm some kind of monster." "I don't think you're a monster. I think you're someone who made some mistakes and is having trouble admitting it." I left Clara's apartment that afternoon, checking into a cheap motel near the highway. If no one was going to support me, I'd handle this on my own. That evening, I decided to go to the house to get more of my belongings. I still had my key, and legally, I had every right to be there. Maybe if Jonas saw me, if we could talk face to face without lawyers and legal documents between us, I could make him understand. I let myself into the house thinking I'd just grab a few things. Jonas was in his office, surrounded by moving boxes. He didn't even look surprised. "The temporary order came through today," he said, sliding the papers across the desk. "Ella told her counselor she's afraid of you. You're not allowed here without a supervisor." I laughed at first, actually laughed, because it sounded insane. My own daughter, afraid of me? Then he turned the monitor around. An email from Eric, 2 days old. "Ligeia, my lawyer says any contact with you jeopardizes my custody case. Please don't reach out again. I'm sorry." Below it, my reply, the one I'd sent in a blind rage and forwarded straight to Jonas. "See what you've done? You didn't just ruin my marriage, you ruined the only real friendship I had left. I hope you're proud." Jonas's voice was quiet. "That's what you cared about most, isn't it? Not Ella, not us, him." I started to answer, to defend, to explain that it had never been physical, that Eric was just a friend who understood me, but the words felt hollow even in my own mouth. "When's the last time you asked how Ella's doing?" he asked. "When's the last time you even said her name without it being part of an argument about how unfair this all is to you?" I couldn't remember. He told me I could see her this weekend. Supervised, in a room with a social worker. I begged, I cried, I promised I'd change. He just opened the front door and waited. 6 months later, the judge signed the papers. Jonas kept the house, primary custody, everything that mattered. I got every other Saturday in a beige room that smells like old coffee, where my 10-year-old daughter calls me Mom, like it's a word she's still trying to figure out how to use. Eric blocked my number the same week the divorce was final. I told myself I was the victim of a jealous husband who refused to understand a harmless friendship. Turns out the only person I was lying to was myself. And now I'm the stranger who waves goodbye to her little girl through a window while a court-appointed supervisor checks the time. I wanted to be understood. I got understood, all right. Just not the way I thought.